The number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits has hit a record high for the second week in a row as the coronavirus crisis continues to cripple the world's biggest economy. The pandemic is devastating the American job market, with first-time claims for unemployment support surging more than 3,000% since early March. That's when businesses began shutting down to try to contain the deadly outbreak. The latest figures from the US Labor Department show 6.6 million people claimed for jobless benefits last week. That takes the total number of Americans who lost their jobs in the 2 weeks ending the 28th of March to around 10 million people. That corresponds to roughly 6% of America's 165 million strong workforce, and economists are warning of even more job losses in the coming weeks. Well, for more on this, Alasdair Macleod joins us now from Exeter in the UK. He's the head of research at Goldmoney Holding, a platform for trading precious metals. He's also an economist and former banker and stockbroker. Welcome to Money Talks, Alasdair. Now, 6.6 million people looking for work in the US on top of the 3.3 million in the 2 weeks prior. These are shocking numbers, aren't they? Do they surprise you? Does the magnitude of these job losses surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all, Oscar, because quite frankly, with 80% of Americans in full or partial lockdown, you're going to see far higher levels of unemployment in the coming weeks. I mean, bear in mind that a lot of medium and small enterprises are running out of cash very rapidly. The level of bankruptcies is going to rise very strongly. And of course, employers trying to avoid that outcome are going to be laying off staff, really as soon as they possibly can. So this is just the start, I'm afraid, of something which is going to continue.
Now, few people doubt that these nationwide shutdowns across the globe are the only way really to contain the spread of the outbreak, but there's no denying the economic impact that these measures are having. So in the face of this, in the face of these vital measures, what does the American government need to do in order to shield the economy as best it can?
It's very difficult to know what to do. I mean, the course which every government has taken is basically to print money, if you like. I mean, borrow it, but it's when it's borrowed, it's not doesn't come from real savings. It comes from the expansion of bank credit, or QE, or asset purchases by the central bank. So basically, this, I'm afraid, is a route towards hyperinflation. That is a very, very big concern. And it's difficult to find the balance between trying to support an economy and preventing that outcome.
Now, some analysts are even making comparisons now to the Great Depression, not just the Great Recession we saw after the 2008 financial crisis, but of the depression we saw in the 1930s. Do you think it will actually come to that?
Yes, it's a very different situation, but there is something which I think we had in common. We have in common today with what happened then, and you will have noted that there were liquidity strains in the dollar markets, with the Fed having to accelerate repos. These are repurchase agreements to inject liquidity into the banks. Now, that was a full 5 months before the coronavirus hit, so we already were sliding into some sort of loss of growth, recession, slump, however you like to describe it. The cycle of bank credit was turning down before this happened. So it's a combination of events. So that, to my mind, is actually very, very concerning.
Now, just last week, we had the US Congress agree to a $2 trillion stimulus package. Now, Donald Trump is even proposing the idea of another $2 trillion in terms of infrastructure spending. Is this the correct path that the US should be taking in order to mitigate the economic damage?
I can understand the rationale between, if you like, helicoptering money to each family. But the problem is that with only food, really, food stores and pharmaceutical, pharmacies open, there's nowhere else to spend the money that he is giving to people. And the result, I'm afraid, at a time of supply constraint, is likely to be very rapid rising food inflation. And that has obviously sociological consequences.
It sure does. Okay, we'll keep an eye on the situation, as I'm sure the rest of the world will be. But Alasdair Macleod, thank you so much for your analysis.
That,